Welcome students. To begin with, we'll start with an important and interesting condition of renal system that is called as benign prostatic hyperplasia or benign prostatic hypertrophy. So let us see in detail. Before moving on, I just want you to think about the meaning of hyperplasia or hypertrophy. So just think and keep it in your mind what is hyperplasia and what is hypertrophy. Okay. Prostate gland. So as we are learning about prostate disorder, we will see first about the anatomy and physiology of prostate gland. So as you know, prostate gland is the male sex gland. It has the shape of a pear fruit, so it is called as a pear shaped organ. So if you don't know, just google how a pear fruit looks like and then compare it with the structure of this prostate gland. Okay, it is a pear shaped organ and the weight is about 7 to 16 grams, and the size of the prostate gland is about walnut. So don't think that as it is a pear shaped organ, it has the size also like that of a pear fruit. Okay, the shape is just like pear fruit, but the size is that of a walnut. Okay, if you don't know what is walnut, that also you can google it out how a walnut looks like. And I am sure those who have seen the cartoon Rio, there are lots of walnuts which they are showing in that cartoon. Okay, and as kids you might have enjoyed, even as an adult when I enjoyed that, you can also enjoy. Okay, so see what is a walnut. Then the function of prostate gland is it helps to control the flow of urine. How it affects the flow of urine we can see as we move on to the pathophysiology of benign prostatic hyperplasia. So for now you understand this much, that you see the position of the prostate gland here. It is located right down the urinary bladder. So just imagine what happens if this increases in size. Okay, so now the prostate gland is normal, the flow of urine is also normal. Okay, so one function is to control the urine flow, and the next function is it produces the fluid component of semen. So this prostate gland produces the fluid component of semen that makes it a liquid form. Also, the prostate gland produces an antigen called as prostate specific antigen. Remember this word because it can be asked as a multiple choice question, because this antigen, the level of this antigen will be high if the patient is suffering from prostate tumors. Okay, so that's just a quick brushing up of memory about your anatomy and physiology of prostate gland. Okay, so to move further, there are mainly 4 areas of the prostate gland. The 4 areas means there is a transition zone which is exactly near to the urethra. See, this is the urethra, this is your prostate gland. Here is the transition zone. This area of the prostate is called as the anterior zone. This is the central zone and this is the peripheral zone. Okay, so imagine when a man is standing, this comes in the front portion and this area comes towards the back portion. Okay, so these are the 4 zones of the prostate gland. I'll tell you why we are discussing about these zones here in the coming slides. Okay, so just see the difference between a normal prostate and an enlarged prostate. See, this is your urinary bladder. Here is where your prostate gland is located. Okay, and the bladder is continued as the urethra. This is the penis, scrotum. So see here, this is the urethra through which the urine flows. And now what happens when the prostate gland is enlarged? See, when it is enlarged, the size of the tissues also increases. So I told you to remember what is hyperplasia or hypertrophy. So hyperplasia means increase in the number or the size of the cells. So here what happens, the cells increases in number, the cell size increases. When it increases in size, what happens, it compresses the urethral orifice. See, this is the normal prostate gland. When it is normal, there is no increase in size, no compression to the urethra, so the urine flows normally and freely through this urethral opening. But when this prostate gland is increased in size, it compresses the urethral opening. So when this, you imagine a straw through which you drink a juice. Nowadays the plastic is been banned, so we are getting less number of straws, but still at some point of time you might have used a straw to drink a juice or a fluid. So just imagine if you press the straw somewhere and you try to sip the fluid, whether it will flow to your mouth, whether you will be able to drink the juice. No, the same thing happens here. The urethral opening is just like a small hollow space, like just like a straw. Now we have pressure over here, so it is being compressed, so the area through which the urine can flow is also very less, so the person will have difficulty in micturition. He will have a feeling of full bladder because the bladder is already filled with urine, and he will sit for micturition, but due to this compression he won't be able to pass urine. Okay, so I think I have already covered the pathophysiology too. Okay, but still we'll discuss it in the coming slides. Okay, again a picture that shows a normal prostate and an enlarged prostate. See, this is a normal prostate. This picture gives whereas the previous picture you can see it was not, this picture is little more clear, I guess. Okay, the bladder, the urethral opening, it is like a cross section. Okay, this is the prostate gland, which is located at both the sides of the urethral opening, and here the prostate gland is enlarged, and when it is enlarged it narrows the urethral opening. Okay, so I'll just show you a video.
If you have benign prostatic hyperplasia, or BPH, your prostate gland is enlarged. The prostate is a walnut-sized gland in men. Just beneath your bladder, your prostate gland surrounds your urethra, the tube through which urine and semen exit your body. Your seminal vesicles and prostate make fluid that combines with sperm cells to create semen. During normal urination, urine flows from your bladder through the part of your urethra inside your prostate, then through the rest of your urethra to leave your body. For unknown reasons, your prostate gland may enlarge as you get older. If you have benign prostatic hyperplasia, your prostate may grow large enough to narrow or block the part of your urethra that runs through it. As a result, your enlarged prostate may slow or block the urine flow out of your body when you urinate.
Okay, so that's it. I think that video has given you a much more clear explanation about what happens in benign prostatic hyperplasia, and also the video says that as a man grows older, due to unknown reasons, most of the males develop benign prostatic hyperplasia. Okay, so this is the introduction to the disease condition benign prostatic hyperplasia. It is a benign enlargement of the prostate gland. So now you may know about the difference between benign as well as malignant. Benign means it is confined to only one area and it will not spread, whereas malignant means there is chances of infiltration. You may have this tumor cells may infiltrate to other body tissues. So benign prostatic hyperplasia is just a benign growth. It is confined only to the prostate gland, and it is not malignant, and it doesn't spread to another surface of your body. And mainly people who are older than 15 years are affected by the enlargement of prostate gland. And when the prostate gland enlarges, this extend upwards, pushing the bladder and obstructing the flow of urine by narrowing the urethral orifice. Okay, The condition is known as benign prostatic hyperplasia, that is the enlargement or hypertrophy, the increase in size of the cells of the prostate gland. And this is the most common urological problem in male adults. If you go to the renal OPD, you can see many of the elderly or middle above 50s, the men will come with the problem of in difficulty in micturition and urinary symptoms that may suggestive of benign prostatic hyperplasia. About 50% of all men in the lifetime will develop BPH. That is, there is a 50-50 chance of developing BPH during the lifetime. And most of the people who are affected with BPH will have a lower urinary tract symptoms. Why? Because they are not able to pass the urine properly. That is, there will be they won't have that feeling of satisfaction after micturition, because still there will be urine that is reserved in the bladder, unable to pass due to obstruction of the urethral orifice. That is happening because your enlarged prostate gland is compressing the urethral orifice. So to be bookish, for exam point of view, you can write this definition as a definition of benign prostatic hyperplasia, and I'll tell you a tip. You can write this as the definition as well as the pathophysiology. I'll explain you how. Okay, it is a non-cancerous increase in size of the prostate gland. It is not a cancer. It will not spread to other parts. So it is just a benign tumorous growth or benign growth or a lump that is it is an enlargement of the prostate gland, which involves hyperplasia of the prostatic stromal and epithelial cells. Okay, so the cells inside the prostate gland increases in number. Okay, and it result in formation of a large, fairly discrete nodules in the transitional zone of prostate. So remember, I already told you when we were discussing about anatomy and physiology why we have discussed about these 4 zones. Okay, mainly the hyperplasia occurs in the transitional zone of the prostate gland. Okay, this is the transitional zone that is very near to the urethral orifice or the urethra. Okay, so what we were seeing the definition of benign prostatic hyperplasia. It is a non-cancerous, it is not a cancer. There is increase in number of the cells of the prostate gland, and once it increases in size, what happens? There are nodules that are formed. When the size is more than what is required, when the number of cells is more than what is required, what happens? There the nodules will form or small lumps will form where in the transitional zone of the prostate. And transitional zone, you saw it is very near to your urethra. So what happens? It push on and narrow the urethra. Okay, so once it increases in size, the urethra is being pushed, it is being compressed, and there is increased resistance to flow of urine from the bladder. When it is compressed, just imagine when you press a straw and try to sip up the juice, what happens? The same thing happens. The prostate is being compressed by the the urethra is being compressed by the enlarged prostate, so the person is not able to pass urine, or the person senses that the bladder is full, but the urine is not, he is unable to void the urine due to compression on the urethral orifice. Okay, so the incidence, almost 50% of men have BPH above the age of 50 years, and by 80 years, when they reach 80, the age of 80, the chances of BPH increases by 75%. causes and risk factors, as we saw that no textbooks or no evidences shows a proper cause of BPH, but it is a part of natural aging process, just like as your hair gets gray or when your visual acuity gets lower as you age. Same like that, there is 50% chance of your prostate gland getting enlarged as you grow old. Then dihydrotestosterone or DHT also plays a major role. That is, the hormonal influence can also cause benign prostatic hyperplasia. And some studies shows that lifestyle is a major cause of BPH. So it is been mentioned that we can prevent BPH by leading a healthy lifestyles. Okay, and this is a treatable condition. And some other risk factors in detail is aging. Okay, so prostate gland enlargement rarely causes signs and symptoms in men younger than 40. That is, as I have already told, it is like a normal aging process as your hair get gray color. Same like that, as you grow older, your prostate gland will also, there is 50% chance that the prostate gland also get enlarged. Okay, and it is less seen in men who are younger than 40. About 1/3 of the men experiences moderate to severe symptoms by the age of 60. So the severity of symptoms is increasing as the age increases. Okay, the family history, there is chances of family history also. If a blood relative like your father or your brother had a prostate problem, you also have equal chances of developing benign prostatic hyperplasia, but it is not necessary. Next is ethnic background. That is, prostate enlargement is less common in Asian men than in white and black men, but still there is increased chances of prostate gland enlargement in Asian men too, but when compared to other races, it is less in Asians. Next risk factor is diabetes and heart disease. See, diabetes is a culprit for almost all the disease problems in our middle age and old age. So studies showed that diabetes as well as heart disease and use of beta blockers might increase the risk of BPH. So beta blocker drugs we use for hypertension, heart related problems, and when you have diabetes mellitus also, you have increased risk of developing benign prostatic hyperplasia. Lifestyle. So most of the diseases are caused by a faulty lifestyle. If you are obese, if you are not maintaining a proper diet, if you are not exercising properly, not only BPH, you may develop many other life-threatening disease conditions which are called as lifestyle disorders. See, this is the pathophysiology. If you can remember, or otherwise you can rewind and go back and see the slide on definition, it is the same. There will be a non-cancerous increase in size of the cells of the prostate gland. Non-cancerous means they are not malignant, they will not spread to other parts. Okay, it involves hyperplasia. So which cells are affected in the prostate gland? The prostatic stromal and the epithelial cells get hyperplasic, resulting in formation of a large, fairly discrete nodules in transitional zone of the prostate. So there will be non-cancerous increase in size of the prostate gland. Why? Because there is hyperplasia of the prostatic cells or the cells in the prostate gland, which are called the stromal as well as the epithelial cells. When the cells increase in size, a nodule is formed. Where the nodule is formed? It is formed in the transitional zone of the prostate gland. Okay, once the nodule is formed, what happens? It will push on and narrow the urethra. And what happens when it pushes the urethra and narrow the urethra? There is increased resistance to flow of urine from the bladder to the external urethral meatus. So the person will start manifesting all the clinical features of BPH. And what are the clinical manifestations? Hesitancy in starting urination. He is not able to start micturating. Increased frequency of urination. Why? The bladder is not properly emptied every time. So again and again the person who is affected will have the urge to urinate. Nocturia. What is meant by nocturia? Micturating during night time. That is in between the sleep. Urgency. Every time he will feel that he need to micturate urgently. Abdominal straining. So you will strain to push down the urine, the urine which is being blocked inside the bladder due to the compressed urethra. So you will strain and you may get abdominal cramps due to straining. Decrease in volume and force of urinary stream. So see, when the meatus urethra is being compressed, what happens? The flow of urine will be less. The free flow or the stream of the urine will become blocked, or dribbling of urine may cause. Suppose you just imagine a hose. You know the hose which you use to water your plants in the garden. So if you give a pressure on the hose anywhere, what happens? Or you try to block the hose, what happens? The flow of water, the strength of flow of water will reduce. The stream of water that is coming out through the hose will be weak. And if the compression is more, what happens? Sometimes the water won't come, or there will be only drops of water that is coming outside. The same thing happens here also. Interruption of the urinary stream, dribbling of urine, sensation to incomplete emptying of the bladder. So they will always have a sense of incomplete emptying of the bladder. The next feature is acute urinary retention. That is, more than 60 ml of urine will be retained back in the urinary bladder. And you know what happens when the urine is retained back? Because what does urine contain? The byproducts. This has to be excreted from our body and not to be stored. So when it is being retained back and not excreted out, what happens? The person is at a chance of recurrent urinary tract infections. The person may feel fatigue due to continuous straining, as well as due to the infectious process. Anorexia, that is lack of appetite. He may feel less hunger. Why does this all happens? When you have a inflammatory process in your body, then you will have fatigue and anorexia as a systemic response. Even if you are suffering from a cold or a mild fever, you will have all these symptoms. Next is nausea and vomiting. It is a common manifestation even with UTI, not just because of BPH. The person may have pelvic discomfort and pain. See, your bladder is distended due to retained urine. Again and again your kidneys are functioning well, so your bladder will be filled again with urine, and the urine which is already been retained is there. Again your kidneys are excreting urine into the bladder. Then there will be pelvic discomfort and pain where your bladder is being located. Then ultimately azotemia. Okay, and what is called as azotemia? It is elevated levels of urea and the nitrogenous waste products, because I already told that urine is an excretory product. It has to be excreted out from our body. It contains all the waste products of our body. So when it is retained, then what happens? The urea as well as the nitrogen compounds, BUN level, blood urea nitrogen level will be elevated here, and ultimately the person may go into renal failure as a result of chronic urinary retention and large residual volumes which the person is not able to void out. And the last, towards the end or in complicated cases, when they do not go and get medical help in an earlier phase, there will be blood in urine, or it is otherwise called as hematuria, that is blood in urine. Why? It is a complication of urinary tract infection. So we have discussed about the definition, pathophysiology, causes, risk factors, clinical manifestations. So now it is the time for assessment and diagnostic evaluation. How to assess whether the patient is having benign prostatic hyperplasia or is it the manifestations of any other disease conditions. So the first one is history collection. So from nursing point of view, when the patient comes to you, you are supposed to collect the history of that patient first. So in history, what all things you are supposed to collect? Remember the causes and the risk factors. You have to ask whether the patient is belonging to any of that risk factor criteria. We have seen aging. You have to see the age group of the person, if he is in his 50s, 60s or above 80. Then you have to check his race. We saw that Asians have less chances when compared to other race ethnicity. We also saw that family history, that is if your close relatives or were having BPH, you have a chance. Then regarding lifestyle, obesity, or if he has any past medical history like diabetes or heart problems, or even the medication history you have to collect. We saw use of beta blockers are also found to be a causative factor for benign prostatic hyperplasia. So in history collection, you have to ask everything which we have seen in the risk factors and causes, if the patient has any of these risk factors or the person was exposed to any of these causes at any time in his life. Next is physical examination. In physical examination, we first you can do a normal head to foot assessment, in which you can rule out suprapubic bulging because of your full bladder. The patient may report of pain, pelvic discomfort, and then as we saw, there is anorexia that can be collected in the history. The person is fatigued. Along with that, there will be fever if the patient is having UTI, and you have to do a digital rectal examination. I will come to this point afterwards. So just remember this word, digital rectal examination, that is examination of the rectum digitally. Why we are doing this? Because we saw the position in, if you remember the previous video which we have seen, we saw the position of the prostate gland, how it enlarges, and when it enlarges what happens. Okay, so we can I'll come to this point later on. Then you will be doing a normal urine analysis to identify the presence of red cells in urine, that is the presence of hematuria, the presence of infectious agents in your urine, that is to rule out urinary tract infection. You can do a urine analysis as well as a culture of the urine. Next is prostatic specific antigen test. Okay, so in this you will be analyzing the amount of prostatic specific antigen that is present in the patient's body. It has at least a 10-year, the level is obtained if the patient has at least a 10-year life expectancy. That is, when do we do this PSA or prostatic specific antigen test? If he is not that old, that is if a person comes to you who is aged with 80 years, 90 years with this with the manifestations of prostatic enlargement, you don't have to go for a PSA, because what happens is PSA is elevated means the patient is having prostatic cancer, and if the cancer is ruled out, what happened? You have to go with all that rigid management modalities of treating a cancer, including chemotherapy, radiation, etc. And if the patient has a low life expectancy, that is if he is 80 or in his 90s, that means the life expectancy is very less, and why to trouble the person with all these complex treatments which is again painful. Okay, so if there is a if the person comes to you at an younger age, and if we have a low life expectancy of more than 10 years, then only we will go for this test. Why? Because such persons we can treat the prostate cancer if it is been ruled out. urinary flow rate recording and the measurement of post-void residual volume, that is PVR. This also we will discuss later on in cystometrogram studies. Then urodynamic studies, that is if you this is done for BPH patients, non-invasive urodynamics is done unless the patient has neurological involvement. Okay, if you suspect that neurological involvement is also present, then you will do an invasive study by catheterizing the patient and all. Otherwise, a non-invasive urodynamic study is done by asking the patient to void. Then you will measure the amount of urine that is being voided. Then we will understand a normal amount of urine that can be voided by a normal healthy individual, and if the and you can check for suprapubic bulge and the amount of urine that is being retained in the bladder. Okay, then urethrocystoscopy, that is again an endoscopic procedure in which you will be endoscopically examining the urethra as well as the urinary bladder. And when you are doing this, what happens, you can see if the urethra is being blocked at some parts. When you saw that if the prostate is enlarged, what happens, the urethra is being compressed and there is a block. You won't be able to pass the endoscope any further after that blockage or the compression. So urethrocystoscopy, ultrasound, then complete blood studies including clotting studies. So why blood studies? Because you saw that the patient may have acertemia, the patient may have urinary tract infection that may again cause that can lead to other systemic infection too if not treated properly. And also you have to check for the coagulation studies. Okay, so we saw this post-void residual urine. This is regarding that post-voiding residual volume. How to do that? First, you have to prepare the client. Ask the patient to drink water and also to notify the nurse when he feels like to void. That is when you have the sensation to urinate. Okay, and then you will give the patient a collecting device in which he will be voiding. Same like it is bigger than your specimen collection bottle because he has to entirely void in that device, not a specimen you are giving, you will be voiding totally into that device. Okay, and you will instruct the patient to empty the bladder as completely as possible. Okay, completely micturate as whatever is been possible, and you have to provide privacy to avoid shy bladder syndrome. Shy bladder syndrome means if you are asking a normal person who is not bedridden to void in a bedpan, in a ward, in the middle of a ward where there is other female patients as well as male patients, lot of young nurses, they may not be able to micturate. Even if they have the feeling to micturate, they will have that psychological problem of shyness to micturate. So that is called as shy bladder syndrome, that awareness of being in a public place that makes them not to void, that will control their urge to void. So in order to avoid that, what we can do, we can provide privacy to the patient. When once the patient senses that no, he is not being washed, then he can void. Immediately after voiding, catheterize using aseptic techniques and a straight catheter. So this is not a long-term indwelling catheter. After the patient voids, immediately you have to catheterize the patient with a straight catheter. Why we are doing that? You have to see whether there is urine that is being retained inside the bladder, and that urine will be collected in another container to measure and compare the amount of urine that is being voided by the patient as well as the urine that is present that is collected after catheterization. Okay, so once you catheterize and you are getting plenty amount of urine, that means what, this much urine was retained in the bladder, and due to that enlarged prostate the patient is not able to void properly. That is why the urine whatever you have drained through catheterization was present in the bladder, and it is being removed out only because you have catheterized the patient now. So you have to record the time, the amount that is being voided, that is the patient has manually voided, as well as the amount of urine that you got when you have catheterized the patient. You have to check for the color of the urine, clarity of the urine, and order of the urine. So you know it is normally straw colored, clear, and you also know the order of the urine, a normal. So these three features will change when the patient is having a urinary tract infection. Also, when there is a much more amount of urine that is being retained inside the bladder, you know, as the urine is being stored, the smell of the urine also changes to stingent. It will cause more, you will have a more pungent smell of the urine once it is being stored for a longer time. And you can cross check the details, and you can find out your data that is being corresponding to a diagnosis of benign prostatic hyperplasia. Okay, so what you have to teach before the test, you have to teach the patient that why this test is done. It is done to understand the underlying pathology, and you have to completely empty the bladder during voiding. Also, you have to check that a residual urine increases the risk of urinary infection and incontinence, because you are catheterizing the patient after that to check the amount of urine that is been left back in the bladder. The patient may question you, I have already voided, why you are catheterizing me? So you are checking whether a lot amount of urine is being left back in the urine, because the patient is not able to void that due to compression of the urethra. So you have to teach them that if this much amount of urine is being retained back, it increases the chance of urinary tract infection, and later you may go into incontinence. What is meant by incontinence? He will not be able to control the muscles of micturition, and he may pass involuntarily urine, and he may stain his clothes in a public place, and that may cause psychological trauma as well. So you have to teach him that. This test poses a slight risk of infection. Why this causes a slight risk of infection? Because you are catheterizing the patient, and if that is mainly it may be due to healthcare associated. So to be at the safer side, follow all the aseptic precautions properly when you are catheterizing the patient. Okay, also tell the patient to report the symptoms of frequency, urgency, pain on micturition, nocturia, cloudy or bloody or malodorous urine after the procedure. Before also, if the patient was having this, that means already the patient had a UTI. After the test, if he develops these symptoms, then ask him to report immediately to start treatment for urinary tract infection. So next managed treatment is cystometrogram. So this is another clinical evaluation, diagnostic evaluation for BPH. In that, you have to take the consent of the patient, check for urinary tract infections as indicated by urine analysis or manifestations. Infection may interfere with the test results. So before cystometrogram, the patient has to undergo a urine analysis, also a detailed physical examination. You have to check whether the patient had a UTI already existing, because the results may cause changes. And for this test, there is no food or fluid restriction that is being needed. What you have to teach the patient? This test evaluates the bladder capacity and the motor and sensory functions of the bladder. So cystometrogram, what does it check? It checks the motor and sensory functions of the bladder. What is meant by motor and what is meant by sensory function? Motor function means, see, you know, when you have the feeling of micturition, your bladder contracts, and that is how the urine flows through the urethra to the external urethral meatus, and you void the urine. So the ability of the patient to contract the bladder, And the sensory function means once your bladder is filled, the impulses are passed to the brain and the patient feels the sensation of a filled bladder. So that is the sensory function. If there is neurological involvement, then what happens, the patient may not get that sensation. Already your bladder will be about to rupture due to retained urine, but still you may not feel that it is filled. So that is a complication. So you will be evaluating these two functions mainly in cystometrogram. You will be given, so you have to tell the patient that the patient will be given privacy during the procedure and the patient will not be unnecessarily exposed. Also tell the patient not to strain to void during the test. So you ask the patient to void as usual, not to exert more pressure to void. Okay, then you will be asked to describe sensations as the bladder is filled, including the first urge to void, the sensation of being unable to delay urination any longer, and others such as pain, sweating, or nausea. So in cystometrogram, the patient will void first, then he will be catheterized, then the physician will instill fluid into the bladder.